You could
Yeah.
maybe like track a hockey puck at a hockey game. I don't, I'm like, it's so hard to figure out what are those transferable skills and how can employers leverage those to be able to better empower their organizations and everything else, because this is one of the most talented group of individuals that deal with high stakes scenarios daily, and they did, and these insane decision making processes that they can just work on their feet so quick. And
Welcome to the Vets to PM Military Transition Academy podcast, where we feature veterans and professionals who've made their mark in business and corporate America to help you achieve a meaningful, lucrative post-service career. On this episode, Tanner Yackley, Air Force veteran and former MQ-9 Reaper sensor operator, sits down with Missy to discuss why drone operators make great hires. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Military Transition Academy podcast by Vets to PM. When veterans enter the workplace, it's really difficult to understand what we do in the first place, never mind a drone operator. And so we don't really talk much about drone operators. Well, that is going to change. Today we have Tanner with us, and he is going to talk about what a drone operator does, and most importantly, how to lead, how to support them in the workplace. And we'll discuss the transferable skills that drone operators bring to employers. So welcome, Tanner, to the show. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Absolutely, Misty. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I greatly appreciate it. And I am so excited to talk about this incredible group of veterans that just brings a powerhouse of skills to the table that is just completely untapped. So like you said, I'm a Tanner Yackley. I operated on the MQ-9 Reaper. I was a sensor operator, which is the one that controls the camera on the MQ-9 Reaper. A real super quick history lesson on that is there's a two-person crew for the MQ-9. One's the pilot and one's the sensor operator. The pilot is the one that flies the aircraft, puts it into the position it needs to, puts it into an orbit, those types of things, and also launches weapons with it too, because that is a part of it. And the sensor operator then controls the camera, puts it on the ground, tracks things, people, vehicles, whatever it may be, and then also guides in those laser guided weapons. So you want to talk about, melting pots of just interesting skill sets between two crew members. It's incredible. And it's like a dance, when you're watching it unfold, and, the times that I, employed weapons and things like that, it was just so strategic and so done with so much precision. So a little bit of my background and why we're talking about this today. Is I spent over a decade flying combat missions. I have over 1,000 combat missions logged, over just above 3,400 hours, and 2,900 of those were in 4 years. For any of the aviators in the community, their jaws are probably being picked up off the ground right now, because for those that don't know, usually you can amass that amount of hours in about 30 years with it. And so we were at just a breakneck pace with it. And the biggest thing that I've seen with this is people don't know what to do after the fact, right? With it being employers, all right? They don't. Somebody walks in and says, "I'm a sensor operator at MQ Reaper." They're like, "Great, I have no clue what to do." It's
Yeah,
like
it's kind of like being a weapons operator. My husband, it's like,
yes.
okay, well, do you want to go and work for ISIS? Like,
Yes,
you know,
exactly. It's like, well, you could
yeah.
maybe like track a hockey puck at a hockey game. I don't, I'm like, it's so hard to figure out what are those transferable skills and how can employers leverage those to be able to better empower their organizations and everything else, because this is one of the most talented group of individuals that deal with high stakes scenarios daily, and they did, and these insane decision making processes that they can just work on their feet so quick. And we'll get into all of that, but that's one of the avenues that I'm trying to push here with this is educating people on these transferable skills with it, as well as the veterans themselves. Because a lot of people like me come out and go, well, I don't know what I bring to the table, because it's not
Yeah.
like in the transition assistant programs and things like that when you're leaving the military. They're like, all right, you're a sensor operator. Here's your transferable skills. Yet. Because ooh, would I love to get there. So it's those types of things that people just don't understand, and it just comes down to a lack of education. So that's the whole purpose of what I'm doing with this, and why you and I are sitting here with this is I want to take this as a holistic approach. I want to, I'm looking at mental health reform, policy reform, FAA. I'm going after all of it with it, and transitioning out is a major milestone for a veteran for it, and really being able to help these companies identify those specific areas and those specific skills can make these companies just powerhouses by leveraging these unique individuals.
Yeah, and we're here obviously to help employers understand, this highly skilled but often misunderstood
Yes.
community, such as the drone operators, right? And so if
Hmm.
you're hiring veterans, this episode is going to be super important to your talent pipeline. So I know, Tanner, that you've transitioned and you've had sort of a rough road. And so let's
Hmm.
go ahead and let's first talk about what drone operators actually do, just so we can set the stage for maybe those employers that are looking to hire veterans. They get a drone operator in their resume sort of pile, and now they're trying to figure out, okay, so what can they do for me? So let's start with the basics. So for those who have never met a drone operator, what does the role actually involve?
Absolutely. It's a great question and a perfect way to start this off because it's just there's so much, lack of understanding. Here's the common things that we hear, right? And from my community and everything else, it's just every day, oh, it's just a video game. Oh, you're just sitting behind a screen and watching these things. Oh, you didn't deploy, so you can't, you didn't get affected. And it's like you think about that for longer than 2 seconds, and you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's like
You
when
know,
people say, "Oh, you just wrote casualty reports."
exactly.
I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, exactly. It's and that's the thing, with it. And there's so many comparable areas with this that we recognize, but for some reason with this in this community, the everyone across the board just looks at it and goes, it's they just dismiss it.
Yeah,
And it's like and it's going, how these guys have these guys and gals are so talented across the board. So they deal with things like, real-time combat surveillance
yep,
with it. And so they can be tracking targets, they can be tracking, convoys, conducting support. And you can imagine, I mean, think of any war movie ever. You
yeah,
think of the Hurt Locker, you think of all these different ones of all these things that have, gone wrong, with the guys on the ground and things like that. And we're there supporting it all and watching it all. We're watching the helicopters come in and pick people up. We're watching, organ or excuse me, squads and things like that go through and breach through villages and things
yeah,
like that, and it's on repeat, with it too. So it's this quick targeting, it's this quick decision making process, and the cognitive overload with it is intense. With it, everyone thinks it's just this. Let's sit back, and I'm just, I'm sitting there with my donut, and my cup of coffee, and sitting there tracking this thing and fly, and I hit a button, and this thing just goes off and does its own rogue thing, right? Because that's what all the narrative always is the rogue drones, and it's like, oh my
yep.
goodness, that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah. So, what kinds of decisions and missions were maybe you responsible for, or just in general the community? I know there's obviously, some secret squirrel stuff that we can't talk about, but in general, like how could we explain this to an employer? What kind of decisions and missions were you responsible for?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the one thing, and the first thing I always love to say this because, and my community hates this phrase. And we've become so adverse to this, but unfortunately, it still kicks around within the civilian community. And it's not just a video game,
Yeah.
right? And being able to hit that and go, these are real-time decisions, right? And this can be anything from convoy support to raid support to high-value targeting, to and this is the piece too with it that is so important to understand. And there's a lot of disconnect with, but there's a moral piece to it as well,
Yeah.
with it. And when it comes down to it, it's because sometimes some of the things are I'm watching, what we call in the business patterns of life, right?
Yeah.
Because I need to figure out when if I'm targeting, a terrorist or something like that, I need to figure out exactly where they're going, what they're doing. So I have to get this intimate knowledge of their day-to-day life. I know how many kids they have. I know how many wives they have. With it, it's part of the entire thing, within it. And I know what time they're going to leave for the market, what time the kids are going to come home. Those are the things that subconsciously I would track, within my head, with it, and it's got these unique stressors with it
Yeah.
that can you're building this skill set that you don't even realize you have in your own brain, because you're able to recognize patterns, you're able to do data analysis, you're able to do all these different things, logistics, and I mean, you want to talk about some of the best people under pressure. I mean, oh my goodness. With it, I mean, we made split second, life-saving decisions at a moment's notice with very little, and it was just going. There was no playbook, especially back when I started doing this in 2010.
Yeah.
There was no playbook for any of this. We were creating the tactics as we went along, and we're going, well, let's try this and see what this works, and let's go work on this during a training event and see if we can make it work. And we did, and we wrote the tactics book on all of it,
Yeah, that's
because
a
there
really
wasn't
good
one.
Yeah, it's a really good point because in the infancy of the career, there's not a lot of technical orders or
Hmm.
instructions or, these handbooks or whatever. Like it's
Yes.
physical operators that are coming up with these strategies, these protocols, these
Hmm.
procedures. And so not only are you hands-on, but now you're in the background and you're
Hmm.
writing the instructions, the information for other people. What do people often get wrong about remote warfare?
Sure. We've touched on a couple areas with that. It's the stigmas behind it, and it's the classic ones, unfortunately, that after 15 years of being in this community, it still blows my mind that we're still having some of these discussions and having to fight for, we are combat veterans.
Yeah.
And that discussion in itself is one that within communities and things like that, and the intertwining of special operations, etc. Unfortunately, our community loves to eat their own when it comes to that,
Oh,
and
I
go,
was just going to
well,
say
they're
that.
not,
Yeah.
and it's like, what? How
Yeah.
could you even? How could you say that?
You're getting
It's
all
like,
this pushback from veterans.
exactly,
It's like,
exactly.
because we got it too, services, personnel, and
Hmm.
manpower, in the Air Force specifically,
Hmm.
services are ones that are doing mortuary affairs and, lack of a better term, bagging and tagging. And the
Hmm.
personnelists are behind them writing the casualty report and ensuring that the information, is getting to the Air Force Personnel Center so it gets to their loved ones. And so, you can't definitively say that that's not a part of combat because
Exactly.
that's the trickle effect, right? Those are the things
Yep.
that happen after you've done your job. Those are
Hmm.
that's when we take over.
Absolutely, and that's the one unique. There's two unique pieces to this, with it. One is every single day I had to go step into a box,
Yeah.
operate for 6 to 7 hours in a foreign country, 7,500 miles around the world, and then go home and buy milk on the way home.
Yeah,
Um,
and
you,
go
you
play
know
with kids or go have
exactly.
these relationships and we can't talk about it, we can't
Hmm.
process it, and
Hmm.
and we don't even have time to process it.
Absolutely. And I'll talk about this super brief, but I also know that the community within this shares this sentiment, right? This isn't just one individual's thoughts on this. I ran a pilot study for anticipating 10 people to fill it out. I had 200 responses in 96 hours,
Oh,
from the community saying, yes, we are hurting. Yes, we need help. And we need this skills and education put in place to help land in the right places after service, because there's just so much lack of understanding across the board from the veterans themselves and the employers of even if they deal with the mental health side of things, there are still really easy things you can put in place to just support them as a human being,
yeah.
right, and
And
that's
to
and
be
that's the
fair,
biggest
right,
thing
like
too.
you know, the services are kind of learning as they're going too, right?
Yes.
So just like the drone operators in that career field is sort of learning as they go, because this is
Hmm.
a relatively new, I mean, if you think
Hmm.
about it, relatively
Hmm.
new career field, you know, and so as we progress, we should be implementing these tools, techniques, and methods to
Hmm.
support, these drone operators in this community afterwards.
Absolutely.
And people like you and Veterans Affairs, and there's lots of different organizations out there. I mean, we're definitely in the veterans are supported era. When it
Hmm.
comes to this specific community, it's just really about understanding their impact and then how they've been impacted. So let's talk
Absolutely.
about strengths, right? So if we
Hmm.
think about this community, I'm looking to hire, maybe specifically veterans, because I know in general what veterans bring to the table, but you
Hmm.
tell us, what are the strengths of this community of the drone operators?
Absolutely. So as far as, different things for transferable skills to employers, right? And looking at this and going, all right, I'm on board. I want to, help this initiative. I want to hire this awesome group of people. What the heck do I do, right? The perfect thing, right, for, I'll give a kind of military example and then civilian equivalent. For it to kind of help connect the dots here with it. And so, the military example is, what we did of monitoring, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance feeds, or ISR feeds, as we'd call it. The aircraft telemetry, the data, live communications with ground forces, integrating target packages into cohesive units. We already talked about the, program development and tactics, changes that we'd have to make on the fly. A super quick point on that is there was a ton of times where we'd walk in for the night, have not a clue this was happening, but they'd walk in and say, "Hey, we got new software for the plane. Learn it, execute it, and teach everyone in the next half hour on it." And us as combat instructors were going, okay, like this is
Okay,
another
good.
Tuesday. It's
Yep.
there wasn't like a wait, what? I mean, of course the first time we were, but then we got morphed into it and started being able to be extremely flexible in those areas. So how does this transition over to civilian equivalent? It's things like coordinating logistics, right?
Yeah.
It's things like IT networks and being able to manage those, being able to do project management workflows
Yeah.
across organizations, understanding operational risks. You want to talk about people that can look at the forefront and look at your processes and systemically tear them apart and rebuild them to understand areas that you didn't even know you had as pitfalls. Oh, we're the best at that because that's all we did. We always thought, what's the worst case
Yes.
scenario that can
Yeah.
happen in this environment right now? And how can I prevent that? And how can I at least have that contingency plan with it and be able to make that flexible and be able to work on the fly and get the exact outcome I want to, or at least close, right? We operate on a lot of 70% solutions, but wow, were we good at it, kind of thing, because we didn't always need that.
Yeah.
So,
And talk
what
about
is
stakeholder management.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So this falls into like, the real jobs is like things like operational management, project coordination, project managers, and especially for, sensors that naturally, sensor operators that naturally come out and we were grinded to the bone as far as work tempo.
Yeah.
So they're not going to necessarily come out with, college degrees and certificates, but that's also not saying that there's not programs out there to help support that. I mean, I know I'm using Coursera for a project manager certificate in the background with this, and it's free, and so it's like, well, why not? To be able to achieve some of these things and get some of these quick certificate programs, even that you can get from these nationally recognized institutions, is
Yeah.
a no brainer when it comes down to it.
Yeah. And if you think about it, employers, there's a lot of buzzwords out there on resumes, but, a buzzword that you'll see, and I mean, not just resumes, but job postings as well.
Hmm.
So employers, candidates,
Hmm.
drone operators, attention to detail, right?
Hmm.
Decision making under pressure,
Hmm.
systems thinking. That's a big thing. That's a big term right now. Systems thinking,
Absolutely.
really being able to look at the whole and then obviously, know your roles and responsibilities, and what you do here is going to impact this. And I also
Hmm.
love what you said about, risk planning, because combat veterans are really good at thinking what is going to make this mission fail. Let's go
Hmm.
ahead and prevent that, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
The contingency plans are there, and that just leads into my second point, being the decision making under extreme pressure,
Yeah.
right? With this, and certain, the military equivalent of this as well. There's many a times that we're making kinetic strike decisions,
Yeah.
with 30 seconds. I mean, that's how long the average 30 to 35 seconds is the average time of flight of a missile in the air, right,
Yeah.
with it. And so you had, I mean, that is not a lot of time. And we had
No.
a lot of pressure in that situation to be able to assess, legal as far as rules of engagement, moral, is this the correct target? And what am I doing, justified and everything else? And then tactical factors, I need to take into account surface winds. I need to take into account, potential masking concerns. Again, think that forward thinking for what's going to stop me from achieving my goal and achieving my mission, right? And achieving that objective. Well, the perfect equivalent for that is the civilian side of making high stake decisions, right?
Yeah.
In cybersecurity breaches, emergency management, logistics bottlenecks. You want a problem solved? Have a combat veteran give you a day with a problem and just set it in front of them and let them go and see what happens. I
Yeah.
guarantee you're gonna have an outcome that you're going, I didn't even think of that, because that's what we do best. Is
Yeah.
is
And
come up with the ways
a
across the
common
board.
term that you'll hear in the civilian sector is like, what's going to be the collateral damage?
Yep.
Well, I think drone operators know a little bit about that.
Just a little bit. I mean, that's our entire MO, is how do we prevent that,
Yeah.
and across the board. So it's and that's the big piece, even things like another one for that is like aviation dispatch,
Yeah.
with it, as well. And we work so well with incomplete information and tight timelines, because that's all we did, with it. It's just, hey, go here and look for something, and you're like, okay, and then your brain starts going and trying to calculate out exactly what you're looking for. So again, how do these transfer over? Well, you get into cybersecurity and analysts, risk management, aviation safety, dispatch centers, all these areas that these veterans are just incredibly talented at, and be able to bring those skills to those environments.
Yeah, and it's important, obviously not every employer is going to be able to ask specific questions that's going to, help the candidate explain their transferable skills. But it is crucial for employers to understand that most veterans are walking out of the military with a project management skill set, an
Mhm.
HR skill set, a management skill set, logistics skill set, cyber IT. And so
Absolutely.
we just have to understand that they may not have the credentials or the
Hmm.
degree to back
Hmm.
that up, because in
Hmm.
some career fields, going to school and getting certifications would have to happen, after deployment or on
Hmm.
free time, and free time
Hmm.
is pretty, you know probably non-existent for
Yep.
some career fields. So it's just about understanding the veteran community as a whole. And then once you kind of learn that they are a drone, operator or from that community, now you're
Hmm.
able to tap into, okay, well, tell me about a time where you had to make a decision under pressure, or tell me
Hmm.
about a time where you had to multitask and think about collateral damage, or tell me about a time where you had to manage risk when you didn't
Hmm.
have all of the information. And I think that's the key. So when it comes to supporting this community, let's talk a little bit about how employers can. I mean, obviously, employers should have some sort of onboarding program, training program
Hmm.
for all of their employees, right?
Hmm.
But what kind of leadership works best for this community?
Absolutely. And the biggest thing with this I mean, it sounds cliche, but solid leadership and trusting these veterans to get the job done. You don't need to come in. All you need to do is come in with a clear objective with what you need achieved. You need to build trust with them, because we're not just going to farm out our skills to anyone, right? We want a drive. We want a
Yeah.
passion for what we're doing. So give us that. Give us the reason why we should be doing this. Don't just tell us that, hey, I need that spreadsheet due by Monday. Like, no, here's the overarching goal that you're trying to achieve for this. Put that in our head and let it run. Because again, we can think of areas that you haven't even identified yet with it. So
Yeah.
share that mission purpose. Give us that objective that we work towards every single day in our military career. And every single day when I walked into a brief and heard that mission objective over and over and over, give us that objective and let us see the value in what we're doing and what we're bringing to the table. And,
Yep.
with that, it leads right into things to avoid, right? Don't micromanage. Because it's especially, and this is obviously veterans across the board. It's just not one of those things that we enjoyed. Being micromanaged. We got it so often in the military and dealt with it in so many ways. I mean, we were told how to put our shirt on and what color socks we needed to wear and everything and how to fold the t-shirts, in basic training and all that stuff, right? And now we want that freedom. We've brought these skills to the table.
Yeah.
We can identify them. Let us go. Let it go and see the absolute incredible talent that you can isolate with something like this. And the biggest thing with this is, realize that it's a delicate balance too, right? It's not like we come out of this again, these robot warriors, these, things that everyone says, oh, it's just a video game. It's, they're not, dealing there. There's areas to this with, hypervigilance or cognitive overload that can happen with it. So be respectful of that and recognize that when all of a sudden our faces might just go and kind of gloss over a second, it just might take us a second, to process this because you can get hit with, these emotions and feelings and everything else with it. And we've got to quit treating human beings like they're just these disposable robots that we put into the workforce and say, all right, here's your task, go, kind of thing. It's with it and being able to help bring in these key insights and let them run, let them make your establishment just a powerhouse, but respect their service at the end of the day because there are key aspects, especially for drone operators in the RPA world, that there are challenges with it, and we've been told our entire lives that we can't talk about anything that we did. So
Yeah.
having that brought back up within the employing world is going to hurt the overall employer because you're going to shut down one of your veterans that is insanely talented. You just need to understand the right approach with it and let them work.
Yeah, so many people in an establishment, in an organization. So it's really hard to give individual attention,
Of course.
to specific people or to a community. But as a whole, if you're going to say that you're veteran friendly, we need to make sure that we have things in place to really
Mhm,
support that. And so a really
mhm,
good example, when I came into Continental Tire, like my first week, Emily, the recruiter, she introduced me to several other veterans. And then, one specific, she's like, okay, he's in your salary grade. This is a good person to really latch on to because he could help
mhm,
you with how we make decisions here, how we communicate, And then they introduced me to other people in different entities that were veterans as well. And so it's really just kind of understanding, we should do this with all of our employees. Like if you have
mhm,
an employee that comes in and that's a
mhm.
Clemson grad, introduce them to other Clemson grads, right? And so it's
Yes.
really just about um, helping your employees integrate into the culture and the community. So have those things already in place, a strong onboarding program. Some organizations have a veteran resource group,
Mhm,
introduce them to other veterans, assign them a mentor. Most companies
mhm,
have these programs already in place. And then when it comes to their working style, have that initial one-on-one meeting and identify what it is they need in order to be
mhm,
successful, what drives them, what doesn't influence and
mhm.
inspire them, and then check in, regularly. And if you are misunderstanding something, ask some good questions in order to clarify sort of what's happening.
Absolutely, and that's the biggest thing, right? And I know as a veteran community, it's one of those common themes, and there's why some of these insanely successful veteran communities are popping up. across the country is because what are we looking for? We're looking for camaraderie. We're looking for that team. We're looking for that common sense of purpose of within the organization. So if you can write out the gate, walk us in the door and say, "Hey, these are all a bunch of like-minded people that get you." And it's not going to be perfect, right? There's going to be different things with MOS and AFSC and everything else,
Yeah.
but at least they can start speaking the language and help, get them up to speed in a way to communicate to them that they understand with it, because everyone knows veterans talk in a very specific way, and it's because of the life or death decisions that we had to make with it. And so clarity and brevity and things like that are at the forefront of our dichotomy and our lexicon when it comes down to it, because that's how we operated. So put us back in that environment, that we did so well in, and let us loose, within that community, and help us forge that way forward with the correct support and with the correct resources. Because it's, again, it's such an amazing thing when you can see, that veteran just absolutely crush the heck out of something, and they're going to surprise you.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
always tell veterans, don't forget, we are the 0.78% of the nation that has served in the military. So we're going to have to do some adjustment as well. So when
Mhm.
we come in, what are your tips and tools for that community when they do enter the civilian sector? How should they navigate their first day, week, year, whatever it may be?
Absolutely. With that, it's one of those things where when they walk in that door, that new job, everything else, right? It's gonna feel like the weirdest thing in the world. You're gonna be like, "What in the heck am I doing here? I feel out of place," right? You're gonna see, depending on what route you go, with it, you're gonna feel a little bit of, fear with it, and go, "What the heck did I do?" Kind of thing, and that's okay. That's the one piece of this that I think we miss a lot of, is understanding that there's going to be this uncertainty, there's going to be those pieces, and that's okay. Just, ask the questions, push yourself, when it comes down to it, and help these employers see what you bring to the table. And if you need more, more a larger, area to work, and say, "Hey, I need to really understand the scope of this project, or I need to understand this," let them know that and have those conversations, because then you're getting that partnership, between you and your supervisor or mentor, or whoever it is, in that role, and making sure that you can bring in your best to help fill those needs of that company or that organization with it. And so have that discussion early,
Yeah.
and then request, feedback across it, and say, "Hey, this is the way I've been operating. These are some of my thoughts, and the ways that I've tackled this project. What did you like? What did you not like? Kind of thing. How can I, tailor this to this company's needs and be able to leverage these skills?" We did it all the time in the military. Right? We solved all these problems. We figured out when we needed to, go full bore and all, full throttle, and we figured out when we needed to throttle back. And the same applies for the civilian community. You've got to understand these dichotomies of these organizations and understand exactly how to navigate them to be successful. You're not going to walk in the door and automatically be, employee of the month and everything else, just because of your veteran status. You got to put in the work, just like you did in the military. So
Yeah.
set the objectives, set the goals, set yourself up for success, build the relationships, and crush the heck out of whatever role you're getting put into, because you already have the skills. You just got to do it.
Yeah. And it's important to realize too, especially those that transition out of the military and then go right into, a new role, responsibility. It's going to take you some time to adjust. Like, not only are you
Absolutely.
adjusting to a new organization, but you're adjusting to not having the security blanket that the military provided you, whether it's the pay or the health and benefits, whatever it is.
Yeah,
But some transformation that has to occur as well. And I always
absolutely.
tell people, when you go into an organization, definitely ask a recruiter or HR, like, "Hey, is there a veteran community, or do you know of any veterans that you can introduce me to?" So ask for sort of a veteran mentor. Keep a notebook and a pen handy and write down your questions
Mhm.
instead of always asking the questions right away, because sometimes, you don't want to stop a meeting, or maybe you want to go to your team and ask those questions. And then, really, last but not least, it's just to be able to take feedback, seriously and not personally.
Hmm.
And then, biggest lesson learned is sometimes, be mindful of observation first, right? We need to
Yes.
observe, and we need to
Yep.
be careful about comparing our new environment to our old
Hmm.
environment, because sometimes we inadvertently, when we bring things up, we
Hmm.
inadvertently disrespect the people that have already been there.
Absolutely.
If you're addressing what you think is an issue or a problem or an area of improvement, the person that worked really hard on what you're addressing is probably right by your side. And so we have to
Hmm.
be careful about wanting to sort of, change things.
Hmm.
It's our turn to sit back. We don't have to
Hmm.
PR every day, right? We sit
Yes.
back, we observe, we learn
Yeah.
our roles and our responsibilities, just like we had to when we first entered, our first role out of technical training school.
Hmm.
We didn't immediately change everything, right? We
Yeah.
observed a little bit, and then we, talked about, hey, how can we improve this for the entire organization?
That's the one thing that I think within our community, especially, across the board, is we expect to just roll into these jobs and these things and, all right, I'm a powerhouse, right? Coming from the US military, here we go. And it's like, that's not always the case. You got to do some research. You got to understand the mission. It's like if I went into a training environment or, a real world mission and didn't have any mission objectives, didn't have any, definable skills, didn't put those tactical objectives on how I'm going to get there on the board. You can't roll into this with no plan and expect to be successful. That's the one thing that we always did really well was,
Yeah.
always having that plan and just being a
Checklist.
surgeon and checklist.
Yeah.
Exactly. So make them for yourself. Figure
Yeah.
out what your goals are when you walk into that company and say, what are my 3 month goals? What are my 6 month goals? Right? What are my year goals? And how do I have actionable items? Not just, theory and say, okay, well, I could try, to talk to
Yeah.
HR. No, what are you going to talk to HR about? What are you going to talk to the training manager about? What are you going to talk to your supervisor about? Create those actionable items because that's what we did in the military. We didn't talk theory. We talked exactly how to get the mission done with these, I don't want to say predictable outcomes, but these outcomes that we put up and then we maneuvered around them as necessary. So set yourself up for success in that way.
Yeah.
Take a lesson from your own playbook and just absolutely bring that powerhouse energy to your organization with it by bringing in those meticulous skills that the military taught you. With being able to tackle these problems, utilize those to your advantage.
I see on a lot of resumes from veterans that, keywords flexible, agile,
Hmm.
adaptable, adjustable.
Hmm.
Well, now
Hmm.
is your chance to prove that you're actually those things, because I'll be honest with you. I work with a lot of veterans every single day, and there are a lot of times where I see for myself that we're actually not that agile. We're not
Uh-huh.
that flexible. We're not that adjustable. We're not that adaptable. And so
Absolutely.
we have to really learn how to, thrive and survive in
Yeah.
different environments. And the civilian world, which is the world that we all operate in, really, that is a different environment than the
Hmm.
military. And we
Hmm.
shouldn't be trying to make it like a military environment.
Exactly. And that's the key here, right? You're not filling out the EPR to hope to check a box and get a firewall 5 every time. Right? With it. It's you've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to be honest with what you bring to the table and the skills that you can transfer over because this isn't theory, right? You're going into real life with a real job and real expectations. So
Yeah.
if you identify gaps, do what you do in the military and get the training, right? Find the ways to navigate that. Find the certificates to get. Find the, on the job training, the course you can go through to make yourself better. Because yes, you have the work ethic. Yes, you have the drive, and you might be able to be agile and mobile and all those things with it. But you need to tailor that to this new mission and this new outcome across the board, and that's going to take a little bit of work.
Yeah, and I would really encourage, anyone that is dealing with any sort of um, you know, especially combat veterans, it's like
Hmm.
go and get the help.
Hmm.
Go and get the help. Make sure you're doing your VA claim. Make
Hmm.
sure you're honest about your mental health and
Hmm.
understand that transitioning from the military to the civilian sector is difficult within itself. Never
Hmm.
mind when you add in, being a combat veteran. And so get
Absolutely.
the help. There's no superheroes here,
Hmm.
right? We're not superheroes just because we wore a uniform, and
Hmm.
just make sure that you are really identifying what you need now in your post-service life. And that may look like therapy,
Hmm.
medication, medical
Hmm.
treatment, whatever. And so that way you can be a more effective and more efficient employee for these employers. So as we wrap up, when it comes to the employers, what is the one thing that you want employers who are looking to hire veterans and maybe come across a drone operator, what is a takeaway that you want them to walk away with?
Absolutely, absolutely. With that, it's the drone and remote warfare veterans are operated without armor, without parades, without any playbook for
Hmm.
how we did for now the invisible battles that we're fighting now, and still are. They carry the weight of real missions, real losses, real consequences, often completely alone and isolated. And so if and I bring that point to bring in the reality of this of if you're hiring veterans and you're leading them, you're building teams that value this resiliency, precision, integrity. Don't overlook this group.
Yeah.
These I'm gonna get emotional with this too. I apologize. They've done so much and proven that with zero playbook and
Yeah.
zero support that they can handle the world and they can take on the missions that nobody wants to do, nobody wants to admit to, and nobody wants to acknowledge. And we sat there and day in and day out did this in some of the most grueling conditions, and now we just need a chance
Yeah.
to truly thrive on our next mission, which is life after service. So give us that opportunity and watch us work, because wow, are you going to be surprised?
Yeah, and the drone operator community, remote warfare, and veteran community, they have a unique set of skills and unique value add that will really help your organization and help the people in your organization as well. And sometimes we overlook that when we entered the service, they gave us a mission, and when
Yep.
we separated and retired, they took that mission away. And a
Hmm.
lot of us want just another mission. And so
Absolutely.
have an intake conversation with us. Let us know what your mission is, and you will probably see one of the best employees in your lifetime work really hard to help you accomplish the mission. And that's what we want as well. We want a team to work super hard for, and so this is a great community to tap into. And Tanner, I so appreciate your vulnerability. It
Of
is
course.
something to get emotional about, because when people don't understand, they just don't ask the questions.
Hmm.
And we're letting you know, to the employers and to anyone that wants to know, ask us the questions. And if we're in a good mental state and we want to share, then we will. But don't assume
Absolutely.
that we don't want to, right? And
Hmm.
so us veterans, we signed this dotted line to eventually, if it came to that, to die for our country. But
Hmm.
now we want to integrate into the civilian sector, and we want to be really good human beings, and we want to add value, and we want to do something that matters. And so we just need the employer to say yes and allow us to do that. So Tanner, I know that you have a lot, going on, and a lot in the background that you're helping, the drone community
Hmm.
with. I know you're doing studies and you're just trying to really get these resources for this community. So how can people connect with you in order to help your new mission?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm starting I'm quitting my job to do this full time. Is the brutally honest aspect of this. I believe in this community so much, and I understand the skills that they can bring. I've done it. I've got the education. I'm halfway through a doctorate in psychology, so I understand that aspect to it. And so I'm tackling this at kind of every single approach. And it's looking at individuals like yourself that are doing incredible work to make these groups and these misunderstood groups heard and understand how they can help transitioning, but so much more than that. I'm looking at veteran service organizations, looking at the VA with it, and being able to identify, because there's so many gaps across these processes. And I don't want to sit here and come in and kick in the door and say you're all wrong, right? With it, and what you're doing is fooey and it's not going to work. And no, it's there's these gaps in these areas that can be improved and make us as a country better, because you're leveraging every aspect to it, with transitioning, with healthcare, with all of it. So my movement is about tackling all of these different areas, but first and foremost putting that remote or drone veteran first at the end of the day, and educating the public and the world on what to do. And I have the tools, the knowledge, the experience, and the education to bring it in and be a powerhouse for any organization that wants to partner with this. And let me educate you. Let me show you what you can do. I've got the modules already built. I've got the training plans already set. I've got the guides ready to go. I just need my champion to be able to take this on and identify this amazing group of individuals that is being lost completely and chucked to the wind. So again, I am so appreciative of people like you, Misty, that come on and be able to give us a voice to this community that is being forgotten and overlooked and told at the end of the day that it's just a video game, because it's so much more than that. With it, it's incredible with the skills that are transferable for this. So take advantage of that as an employer and go hire yourself a drone operator.
Well said. Thank you so much for your service, Tanner, and thank you for what you're doing for the veteran community. To any employer that is listening, we do have a veteran hiring toolkit that can help you understand the unique value add that veterans can add to your organization. And for all of the military service members and veterans that are listening, at Vets to PM, we are your one-stop shop for the military transition. We help you identify your transferable skill sets. We help you validate them with that certification, such as PMP, ACP, APHR, and so much more, in order to really translate well so you can transition well, right? And then we help you show and tell, prepare your interview and your resume and your LinkedIn in order to connect to those companies that want to hire you. And so please check out vets2pm.com for all of those resources. And again, Tanner, thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Thanks so much, Misty.
Thanks for joining us at the Military Transition Academy podcast. If we sparked your interest and you're ready to learn more, visit vets2pm.com. We'd love to help you prepare for a meaningful and lucrative post-service career.